Hello, and welcome to another episode of That 60s Recording Podcast, the podcast that has conversations inspired by the golden era of recording. I hope you've all had a lovely week. Today, I am really excited to be joined by Liam Gough, who is the drummer for the Teskey Brothers, who are an Australian band. I think I always get wary of describing genres of bands, but I think you described them as kind of Motown-inspired Americana, very soul-y and very, very sort of 60s influenced. And the way that they approach recording and the way that they approach just the general attitude of the band is heavily analog-inspired. And I came across Liam through Instagram. He actually messaged me to say he was enjoying the podcast, and I checked him out, and I realised he was the drummer for the Teskey Brothers, and I've been a big fan of them for quite a while. And it turns out he's got a really tidy analog setup at his house in Australia. And so I was really keen to speak to him, and especially as a fellow drummer, thought it'd be interesting to sort of geek out about both of our experiences. I mean, he has slightly more experience recording to directly to analog than I do. But I thought it'd be interesting to talk about those experiences and the way that we approach remote working. So this is a really fascinating conversation, I think. It was really interesting to speak to him, and he's such a lovely guy, and that band is incredible. I would urge you to go and listen to them. You know, may not pause the pause this and go listen to them right away, but go and check them out. It's the Teskey Brothers, Teskey. Really great soul-inspired band. So anyway, we'll just dive right in. Here we go. Liam Gough of the Teskey Brothers. It would be interesting for us to start with talking about the Teskey Brothers and sort of how that band and how you describe that band, and if anybody listening hasn't heard them, that's how I know of you. And how would you describe the sound of that band and sort of the way it operates?
I think it's a bit of an amalgamation of the four of us, our sort of tastes in music and what we grew up listening to. So it's a real mix, but I mean, a lot of people, I don't know, people say that Josh's voice is sort of something like Otis Redding's voice a little bit. But I think it's just a reflection of all of the blues, R&B, soul, rock and roll, psychedelic music that we grew up listening to from the 60s and early 70s, really.
It's definitely got, you can hear some drilling going on outside my window. Yeah, it's definitely got that kind of exactly what you described, like a Motown-y, 60s-y, raw vibe about it. But it's the production of it is obviously sounds, it cuts it in the modern day, but it's definitely got that. I don't know how you'd even describe it. It's got almost a live feel about it. I'm interested in talking about the sort of your newest album, Run Home Slow specifically, just because that's the one I know the best. But was it, in terms of recording, were you recording live in a room together to get that sound?
A lot of it we were. We sort of, from pre-production, the four of us were getting in a room in the home studio at Sam's place, and we were working on the songs with the idea of recording them live completely as much as we could. But when push came to shove and Paul Butler showed up in Australia, he'd flown in, we had him for 3 weeks, he was sort of like, I don't know if you guys are ready to fully record live. We'd been touring flat out, so we hadn't really had the preparation to really resolve the tracks in the way that he thought needed to be done, and I think we agreed with him. So a lot of the album was recorded partially live, maybe rhythm section, and then lead guitar and lead vocal were cut over the top. But there's definitely live elements in there. I think majority of the tracks, it's at least bass and drums being recorded live to track together, and most songs without a metronome as well. So there's movement in there, and yeah, it's definitely a live feel that we like to maintain.
I think that's an important one. The without a metronome, that's a big one, isn't it? That definitely will help. Whether the the sort of tempo changes or adjustments are noticeable or not is another thing, but it definitely adds to the feel of it. I mean, did you? I've done a lot of that, and I think it works great. And I don't think. Do you feel pressure as a drummer to record like that, or are you? It's almost quite an exposing way of doing it, because there's that classic Stones track where Charlie Watts speeds up enormously through the whole track. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head now. My mind goes blank during these conversations.
Yeah, it was talked about the other day. Someone was talking about it the other day after the passing of Charlie Watts.
I can sing it. It's the one that's doing get it to go get go. It's got it's that sort of funky sort of cowbelly beat at the beginning.
Ah, yes. Yeah, but it definitely has a lot of movement in it, and it's a big part of the song. And the music that we grew up listening to has a lot of push and pull in it, and people tried to beat it out of me when I was younger in school, when I was having lessons and playing to metronomes, and you couldn't. The tempo wasn't allowed to fluctuate. So that was a hard thing to navigate with, particularly Josh and Sam in the band. Brendan, the bass player, I'd played in a funk band during high school. And then towards the end of high school, I met Josh and Sam. And yeah, they wanted the music to sort of move. And I was like, no, that's you're not a good musician if the tempo is fluctuating. But then, if it's intentional or if it's a happy accident, then it's good. And so we try and find that happy medium between things feeling good and sounding good, and sounding like a band that can't hold time.
This is a conversation I seem to have once in a while, and I think it's an important one. So when there's this is going to sound pretentious, but there's definitely beauty in imperfection. That's something I learned quite a lot when I was sort of in coming up in original bands and in working with producers who were a lot more experienced than us. They're encouraging us to let mistakes run through, because that's kind of, as human beings, this is the way I understand it. We attempt to sort of fix those mistakes mentally, and we like that. Whereas if something's perfect, there's nothing for our brain to fix, so we kind of switch off from it quite quickly. And one of the things that I think lends itself to that is tempo. And like we let the Beatles records, just because obviously I know them well, but they're full of out of tune vocals and out of tune guitars. If tuning is an issue, then why can't tempo be in that box too? And Ringo speeds up and slows down all the time, and he's not doing it because he's not a good drummer. He's doing it because that's what the song needs. A good example I always use is "I Feel Fine," where there's two real distinct sections in that song, and one section speeds up massively and one slows down massively. It's just what the song needs. Why would he not do it? He is playing for the song, and I think that's as a drummer. It sounds like, I'd be interested to know. Were you trained? You sound quite musically trained. I can hear some jazz in your playing.
I wish I was. I think I wanted to be a jazz drummer, but my teacher through high school and when I was in uni, I think he knew I wouldn't be a jazz player, but he did his best to teach me jazz, which definitely helped. But I'm not a jazz drummer.
Well, I can hear it in your playing for sure, and I think that it's, as you've just said, it's really difficult when you've had it sort of beaten into you for years and years that your job is to hold time really solidly, and then suddenly you realise that that's not that important, and push and pull is fine. It's difficult to unlearn it.
Well, I mean, look at orchestral music. The conductor's leading all these time fluctuations, and the amount of emotion and feeling in that music is huge. So, I mean, I guess, when drum machines came in and the world wanted to go digital through the, late 70s, 80s, 90s, you had to compete with drum machines. And then eventually people are still using drum machines, but there's a reason why, you and I are recording drums and trying to replicate sounds from the 60s and 70s, because there's a human element in there, and it's perfectly imperfect. And, over polishing things potentially takes away the thing that was unique about it. I like to think of it as like painting or drawing. My favorite painter is John Singer Sargent, and you stand back from one of his paintings, and it's amazing. It's full of life and it's full of color, and it looks like a photograph in a sense, but then you get up close to it and there's thick brush strokes and it's all painterly and beautiful, and you wouldn't get that from a photograph. So, if you want a photograph, take a photograph, but there's no point drawing or painting something and then trying to over-perfect it until it has, the resolution of a photograph or something. So that's sort of something I try to keep in my mind when we're making music, and the temptation to try and fix things creeps in. That's
such a great way of putting it. I've never quite thought about it like that, but I think that's exactly right. So I'm interested to know what Paul Butler was like to work with. I'll sort of preface this. So Paul Butler, I know of him through, he worked on Michael Kiwanuka's first record, which is, like, when I heard that was just game-changing. Like, that record is so raw and so exciting it was one of those rare moments where you kind of listen to something and you just think, wow, I don't know what that was. And that's how I know of Paul Butler's stuff. And then we kind of linked up a little bit about him, and I'm interested to know what your experiences working with him are like, because he sounds like a really interesting guy to work with.
He's amazing. He's very creative. But it was the Michael Kiwanuka album that sold him to us as producer, because we spoke to a lot of producers, but we really gelled with him. And I think we only had 2 Skype calls with him before we signed up with him to produce. And he flew into Australia. We had him for 3 weeks leading up to Christmas. And, we had grand plans to get the album basically finished, and strings and horns and everything tracked in these 3 weeks. But of course, working in an analog manner, which is the way we chose to do it. He literally arrived one afternoon, and we switched the tape machine on. And he'd been told that the Studer A800 was completely mechanically ready to roll, like a really A-grade machine. Switched it on, and smoke literally started pouring out of the machine. And he walks out of the room and calls our manager, and he says, Jeremy, I'm not sure if this is going to work. But he was a real problem solver, and he's an extremely creative guy. I don't know if people are familiar with his work as a musician as well. Is it the Bees? Was that his the project?
I don't know. I'm not sure. No, I don't know too much about his history.
Yeah, check out his band, The Bees. It's very creative, sort of 60s psychedelic kind of inspired stuff. But yeah, I'd just say that he has a passion for creativity, and, his role as a producer, we'd done a lot of production ourselves. We'd recorded demos that by ourselves in our studio that the label was already really happy with. And, we ended up doing a bit of chasing our tail, trying to get that demo-itis out of our system, trying to recapture the magic of there being no pressure because we're just doing pre-production ourselves. So he was really into drawing the best performances out of us and trying weird and wonderful things. So
how did that go? What were some of the things that I can picture? I mean, you guys, from what I've seen, you guys have all got quite tidy home studio setups. So how did you, how do you go about trying to recapture the magic?
It's actually Sam, the lead guitarist. He built up a studio in his old family home underneath, and he turned his bedroom into a control tracking room, and eventually built out another room, which was a separate tracking room. So that's the studio we've recorded most of our stuff in, with the Studer A800, 24-track, 2-inch machine. And that album was recorded through a Tax Scorpion desk that was noisy and buzzy and had all sorts of problems. And the Studer 800, we were lucky if we had, 16 channels working at any one time. Having to switch in and out power supplies so that we could record on, 9 to 16 and then switch them out. And but Paul Butler was all over it. Most of the stuff is recorded in that studio. We've done pre-production there, and I guess we sort of have our habits, the way we'll go about things, and Paul would step in and modify those habits and question hey, well, why are you doing it like that? Maybe we should try it like this, rather than us just defaulting to what we know and what we've done in the past. Because we did our own first album we released, Half Mile Harvest, by ourselves, essentially. Brendan, the bass player, played a more major role in producing it, and Sam engineered it. But yeah, so having Paul Butler step in was a welcome change, and he definitely lifted our game, I think.
Was it a challenge sort of relinquishing control? So in the sense that he's pushing your habits, how did that feel? Did you guys, I mean, I'm sure you're all really lovely, but it must have been challenging to have someone come in and question what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was a lot of constraints on the 3 weeks of tracking that we had him for. A lot of pressure to get it done between touring and time off and things like that. And it's funny, if you really want to get deep into this album, Mushroom Records, our label we're with, did a podcast about the recording of this album called 180 Grams. So you can go in there, and it actually has interviews from Paul Butler and everyone that worked on the album, musicians, things like that. So if you want to hear Paul Butler's voice and hear some of the funny stories and learn about some of the tensions and struggles we had, you can also have a listen to that podcast. But yeah, Paul Butler was, I think, in a lot of ways, was kind of like our guru psychologist. He was able to read the room, and when tensions were rising, when someone was getting tired, he'd sort of say, "Oh, it's go grab a cup of tea or have a beer, or take the night off," because the temptation was just to work from 9 a.m. till 4 a.m. if we were given the opportunity. So yeah, bless his cotton socks, he was able to get the whole thing together. And yeah, he flew back to LA because he was based in LA with 2 rolls of 2-inch tape that we'd cut together with the album, and we waved him off, and we were terrified sending him off with the tapes through the X-ray machines because we'd heard lots of stories about tapes being wiped, and yeah, so
stressful.
Yeah, it was an amazing time.
It's I mean, the album sounds incredible. I'm going to link it in all of the notes so that anyone, that everyone can go and check it out. But it's just got that sort of, like I said at the beginning, that sort of feel about it. It does feel live. I know you said that only partial bits of it are, but it's got that. There's the communication between you guys. Maybe that just all came from the pre-production or just because you've been touring so much, but it definitely feels like there's strong communication. I'm thinking of it specifically from a drum perspective, the reactions of musical reactions that are going on in certain bits. I just was listening to Paint My Heart before you came on, and that stands out to me as what you're playing is. It feels live. It feels like you're all just reacting together in the same space. And it's whatever he's done is magic. It's great.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Also having Paul Butler there to actually engineer. If Sam was playing the head engineer role in the first album, he would often have to either set the controls in the control room and then with the tape rolling, walk into the tracking room, and then we'd have 18 minutes of tape to do as many takes as we could. So with Paul Butler there, he could step out of the engineer role and really focus on lead guitar, which enabled us to play more live. And sometimes in the past, on the first album, he would be in the control room engineering while he played guitar. So, but yeah, Paint My Heart was a real wild one because I think on the studio version is like 7 or 8 minutes, I think.
Okay.
It's a long one. There might have been I can't remember if there was a radio edit for the albums.
On the album it's 6 minutes.
Okay, so it got edited down. It was longer. When we play it live, it goes for about 12 minutes, probably. But that was all mostly live. There's, some overdubs in there. But I think we ended up with 3 good takes of that song in its entirety. And Sam was kind of hell-bent on using the majority of the song of like take 2, but the outro of take 3. And we'd never cut 2-inch tape before with a razor. And Paul Butler's like, yeah, we'll do it. And we're all sweating bullets. We're going, no, that's like, the stuff of legends and we're terrified to do that. Paul's such a cowboy. He pulls out the tape and, marks it up and just does it and makes a perfect edit. And my God, you could have heard a pin drop in the room when he was making those cuts.
Amazing.
So it's interesting that is what you hear on the album is live recording, but there is one splice for the outro. So
can you hear the splice? Can you hear it? I'm sure I can't.
I know it's there, so I can't. I can't really make an unbiased opinion about whether you can hear it or not. But listeners, have a listen and see whether you can pick where the splice is.
Yeah. How did you manage that? Sort of we grew up in I had the last guest I've had on before this. We're doing this interview, Andy. We were talking about the fact that we all kind of grew up in a digital world, essentially. The first recording experiences I had were all digital, and I've kind of learning about the beauty of analog as I sort of explore all this world a bit more. How did you guys deal with or approach that sort of thing of, we've got 3 takes here? I mean, were you analyzing every single take, or were you sort of coming to an agreement between you that maybe that wasn't your best drum take, but it was a best bass take, so we're going to go with that one, and you're going to sort of say, okay, that's cool, I'm happy for that to slip through? I mean, obviously the mistakes are not going to be ginormous, but you're going to feel that perhaps you favour a different one over another. Coming from sort of growing up in a digital world, how did you sort of come to terms with sort of having limitations like that?
Yeah, we have to try and be democratic and also express our feelings. So the 4 of us in the control room, when we're listening back to something like that, we'll go through, and I guess the first thing is like listen out for deal breakers. If there's something that I'm not going to be able to live with on being released, you have to speak up and say there's no way that take 6 can be used in my opinion, or this part of take 6 or whatnot. And yeah, we just have to talk it out and be flexible, and some of those deal breakers, the guys in the band listening back, they'll say, well, that's my favorite bit, or I like that little bit of imperfection. And yeah, we just sort of have to come to an agreement. And if someone feels really, really passionate about keeping or deleting something, we let it happen. And once it's deleted, it's gone on tape, So we've kind of gotten used to that. We've kind of gotten used to, we've only got 2 channels for vocals. So once we've got 2 good vocal takes, it's like we'll pick a channel, or we bounce between and, and comp together a vocal track. But the limitations with working analog like that, I think, have been really good for us, because it just taught us to commit. We just have to commit and go with it. And if it's good, it's good. If it's not, it's not. You can't polish a turd, but you can roll it in glitter.
Well, yeah.
And when you're working with analog, I feel like there isn't that much glitter. You can't just keep piling on plugins and messing with the sound. You've got to have a good sound to begin with, and get a good capture, and then mixing's hopefully a bit easier from that point. Yeah.
So that album was released in 2019. Have you guys been writing through the pandemic? What's coming next?
Yeah, so we've been writing ever since then, really, on tour, because everyone in the band writes. So we've all been writing, and especially through this COVID break. Josh and Sam have each had another kid, so they've taken a bit of time off with that as well. But yeah, we're working on that. We did release a live at the Forum album, which we recorded at the Forum in Melbourne, and we didn't record it. We got our friend Alex Bennett to come in, and he actually dragged a 1-inch MCI 8-track tape machine in to kind of like this side of stage compartment. It's kind of like a janitor's closet, and a vintage Chilton 16-channel desk. And so he recorded us across 3 nights, and so we released that a while ago, and that did really well. So yeah, we worked on that, and then we actually did a live recording, which wasn't really that planned, with Orchestra Victoria, which is a 40-piece orchestra. And so that's been recorded, and it looks like that may be being released as an album in soon as well. But
cool.
Certainly before our next studio album. So
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy to think that we'll have released 2 live albums between the 2 studio albums. So
I think that that's something that's been lost. I mean, I can't remember bands in the last sort of 20 years releasing live albums, and I think that just goes to show it sort of plays into the whole story of what you guys are creating. I think I'm trying to think as I'm talking. There's an artist in America called Brandi Carlile that I absolutely love, and she's got a live album out, and that's probably the only live album I've noticed in recent times that I've taken any notice of, maybe. And I think that's really cool that you guys see that as a valued part, because, obviously there's going to be, I think the way that you're recording in the studio will sort of produce one set of results. But as you say, songs get extended live and they become more exciting, and you can have more players in. But then not only that, you're getting like tape in to record straight to tape from your live performances. That's cool. That's very cool.
Well, we were told we were kind of mad. The labels were like, "No, we're not doing that." And I think we funded it, and then we were like, "Well, we'll do it, and you see if you like it." And then they ended up liking it. But it was interesting because, having recorded 2 studio albums and then toured them for a few years, the songs sort of do develop when you're playing them live. And so we wanted to sort of capture what had happened after a year of touring Run Home Slow. So that's a really interesting reference to hear what we did in the studio versus what we did live after touring the songs for a year or so. But, we grew up with these live albums that just blew our minds, and I don't know why there isn't more of it happening. There's so much life and showmanship and the feeling in the room that gets captured in some of these things are just absolutely amazing. I think that's what draws us to them, is just that live essence of performance and energy, And it can all fall to shit pretty quickly.
Yeah. It plays into this sort of, like I said, the way that you guys record in the studio, but there seems to be people coming back round to the fact that you need to have strong musicianship in order to record the way that you guys are recording. You all need to be great at your instruments, and in order to perform that live, I mean, with no tracks, and that seems like a stupid thing to say, but every band plays with tracks these days, and it's hard to escape that. And I think that there's so much merit in just removing yourself from all of that and going, we're just going to play the songs like songs as a band, and it, if you want what a track would bring, you bring a 40-piece orchestra in with you to do that with you. And I think that's where that magic comes from. And I think maybe that because this sort of as a musical world, we're coming back round to the idea of sort of analog in inverted commas, and having a sort of that attitude towards playing. Musicianship has to get better. How many times have you heard on interviews that I've done on this podcast or other podcasts or other interviews where older musicians say, back in the 60s everyone was so brilliant, we couldn't do it again. And I think that's being forced upon people now. That goes for you guys and a lot of the sort of bands in the same category. We were just briefly talking about another Australian band called Boy and Bear, and they're a great example of it. They're incredible live, and their musicianship is second to none. They need to do a live album. I'm sure they've got one. They must have one planned. They absolutely need to.
Let's hope, because they're an amazing live band.
That's it. And how many? it seems to me quite rare these days that you go and watch a band that has that energy live. If anything, you go and watch a band and it's almost like the band expects you to expect a replication of the record, but that's not what we want. we want something raw that's different from the record. And I commend. I think it's really commendable and admirable that you guys have recognised that and then documented it in these couple of live albums that you're doing. Well, the one that's out and the one that's potentially coming. I think that's really cool.
It's cool, but I mean, it's not. We don't know anything else. We've never played to a track before. We've never had a click track on stage. Certainly, sometimes in the studio. So we've been doing this for the last 16, 17 years together. And the first 10 years of it, we spent playing in pubs and weddings and parties. To people that probably didn't want to hear us play. So, it's all we know how to do.
Has your experience with the last album influenced how you're going to approach the next album, or is that conversations that haven't started yet?
Yeah, we've been discussing it a lot and trying to think about how we want to go about it. And the funny thing is we're not strictly bound to binding ourselves to recording to tape or completely analog. Mm-hmm. We may do that, but I think we could potentially set ourselves the same limitations and rules if we have the right producer and work in the same mentality as in analog, but utilizing digital. A lot of the sound probably comes from the summing. If you record digital and then use analog summing down through a desk or some sort of summing device. So, no, we're not really sure yet. But, I'd love to do the same concept again with the same toys or some different toys. And, we'll just have to see what happens.
Cool. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that part one of my conversation with Liam Gough. I have the second part of that conversation coming up next week where we dive into his home studio and talk a little bit more about gear specifically and what he's got going on and how he uses it. Also his approach to remote working, which is really interesting, especially from my point of view as a drummer doing the same thing, essentially. It's interesting to hear how somebody else does that. So that just leaves me to say, if you'd like to support this podcast by buying a mug, you can do that on my website, allyouneedisdrums.com. There's a link to the shop there. Thank you to everybody who's purchased already. I really appreciate the support. You can also get in contact with me. My email address is joe@allyouneedisdrums.com. You can do that with feedback, guest suggestions. If you're interested in getting in touch about my remote drum services, anything you like, just send me an email. Be nice to hear from you. So I just want to say a big thank you to Rory for editing the podcast, and to Joe Kane for the intro and outro music, and for David Henshaw for the lovely artwork he supplies. Have a great week, and I will see you next Tuesday. Goodbye!